Hi, I'm Matt from HockeyReviews.ca, and this is the Vaughn SLR 4 pad review, and we're going to compare it directly against my custom SLR 3s, see what the changes are, see how they play. We did a bunch of stuff on here, including the thigh rise test with these, because this is a demo set as well. I got a couple skates with these, but I also actually skated with a previous set of SLR 4s, so I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on that set as well. Now, for this pad review, this review would not have been possible without the help of Just Hockey. Link to them in the description and the comments. That link in the comments will get you a percentage off of a stock set of SLR 4s. So if you're looking for basically this set of pads, because it will be the spec, you can click that link and support the channel. I don't get anything from that link. It's all going directly to help you guys out, the viewer. So hopefully I can keep doing stuff like this. So if you want to support the channel, check out Just Hockey for your hockey needs. Hugely appreciated for me to be able to do this with the demo sets and stuff like that. I love testing out gear. This makes it possible. So huge thanks to them. Make sure you support them with the links below as well. We have the blocker review that is already out there, and we have the catching glove review as well. So check out those videos. I go through my experiences with them as well as do some tests on the glove as well, just for protection and stuff like that. So for this one specifically, we are talking the SLR 4 pad compared to the SLR 3 pad. Now, this is a different boot design, and I saw people online already talking about this boot design, and I already found really bad info online about this boot design already. So let me talk about this. Both of these pads are 34+2, and when you line them up, the 4s are slightly smaller height-wise than the 3s are, but when you actually put them on your skate, they end up fitting pretty much the same. And me using these, I actually use one of these pads and one of these pads on a skate. I have footage of it, you can check it out. I noticed no difference in sizing on them, and you can see how they fit where I land on the block and stuff like that. It's pretty solid. Pretty much the same on both of them, and they end up playing pretty similar. The boot, we will show a view of the boot on the skate and how different it is, but Vaughn did a very good job in sizing on here. So if you're used to SLR3 sizing, and even honestly Vaughn V10 sizing, you're probably gonna know what your SLR4 size would be, and it should be pretty much the same on that. From this view, we can talk about and we'll compare the boot stiffness and the overall pad stiffness. Now, a few things on this. I ended up buying this set custom, and I never did a full review on them, which I suck and I should have. Once I got these pads, the pad was already like half a year in a life cycle already, and then there was something wrong with my pads. They were built wrong. One of them was built with stock flex, so it was super flexible, and that's how I ended up being able to do the thigh rise test on the stock one versus my more stiff one. And then one was built correctly, so I had to send my pads back in. They came back. By the time I got everything in there, I just didn't get to the review, and I needed to do that, and I didn't. So this video will also talk a lot about kind of how both of these pads play, because you should have been able to watch the previous one of this to get an idea of how this pad overall plays, but I'll kind of cover that here so you get an idea of how this pretty much is. It's a butterfly pad, it's their stiffer pad, but it's not a 2x4, and it doesn't feel like you're playing with a piece of plywood stuck to your leg. It's pretty unique in that sense. Going on to the stiffness, the boot on this is pretty stiff. It flexes a little bit, but it's a lot stiffer than some of the other pads I've been using recently. You can see there's some give. You don't really notice it all that much though, to be honest, and it feels fine. Now, driving into the post, I wouldn't notice this like getting stuck in the way. You can see it does flex when you really push into it. Just like this is not doing a lot, but when you really go into it, it does flex. So when you do those hard post drives, you don't notice the boot getting in the way at all, so it's solid for that. Now, for stiffness, this is not the stock stiffness, or when the pad originally came out, it wasn't the stock stiffness. The SLR3s were a lot softer than what this is. So mine still has a bit of flex to it. When I got them new, they were really straight and pretty stiff. They've softened up over time and have gotten softer, as you can see, but still pretty stiff overall. And the stock one of these, if I did this, I could basically just fold it completely down. It was so much softer. And when we look at this for the SLR4, we look at that boot, same idea. If you really crank it, it's actually a bit stiffer than what that one was. But I want to call out here, Vaughn is a custom goalie company. You can do a lot of custom options on there. So if you want a different type of like softer boot and stuff like that, you can reach out to Just Hockey. You can contact them and also contact their Vaughn rep through them as well, when they'll go through specs and stuff that you want. So if you want a softer boot than this, you can. But it is definitely stiffer than what was on that 3, as you can see, and pushing it down doesn't really move at all. And with the way that this boot sits on your skate, I haven't noticed any issues with this getting in the way, and also driving into the post. It fits totally different on your skate, so driving into the post is probably going to be a bit different than what the 3s were, so I wouldn't worry about that at all. Looking at the thigh rise stiffness, you can see it is currently stiffer than my pad is, and I think this pad is going to break down a bit more, just through usage, and it will get softer over time, so it will be closer to what my pad is, but it is stiffer than what my pad is, and this I believe is the stock stiffness. The V10s are getting stiffer now, but this pad was supposed to be the stiff line and it was generally kind of soft, so the fact that they've gone stiffer here is great, and I'm a huge fan of it. And next we go on to the most important thing on goalie gear, which is the graphics. And obviously this isn't my set, so it's not a crazy custom colors and funky colors. This is a demo set, so it's supposed to be pretty neutral, but the graphics I think look pretty solid. I also think it looks pretty cool how it's kind of like fades into black, white, gray, then the black. I like these colors, are fine, they're neutral. Everyone actually really likes this color pads when I wear them out. They think it looks sharp, as people say, versus my very colorful normal ones. But you can see the graphic on it and what it looks like. It's decent enough where you can break it up. I almost did a custom set of these in Arizona Coyotes colors. I had some amazing colorways with the different zones and everything that I'll show up here. Vaughn, I think, did a pretty good job of allowing you to kind of customize the graphics on these to do very different and unique zones, while I think also making it pretty clean if you wanted to as well. So I got to give him credit for that. So I actually had a bunch of issues filming this video, and unfortunately when I went to edit this, I realized that the part of this talking about rebounds and the face of the pad did not work. Unfortunately, I don't have those pads anymore because I sent them back to Just Hockey. So I'm going to talk about it with the SLR 3s that I have here. They're very similar in that regards, and I'll call out some points on there. So for the pad face itself, the SLR4 actually does have more pieces of binding and this nylon cord binding the pad and the foams all together, and it feels like it kind of is done to hold the face of the pad kind of down more. When you have a total bindingless design on the front and you don't see those cords anywhere, the face can kind of come up a little bit. You can kind of see it on this, how you can kind of push down and there's some gaps. It's not that bad on these pads, but I've had it on Brian's pads, which it's more noticeable, and you can sometimes see it on Bauer pads as well. 4 rebounds on this pad. These pads are kind of interesting because I feel like at certain points they have pretty solid rebounds, and at certain points they're not that solid, and it really just depends on where it gets hit, which can be said for a lot of pads. But let me just put this sound out here, and we go on to the shin. So you can hear how that's pretty big difference on those two. One, that's probably the carbon up here versus in the shin. But I actually found that the shin does rebound a lot better since the thigh rise will bend a lot more, so that will take a lot of the impact, and the only way that really comes off is a hot rebound if it's slingshots out. But down here I found it rebounded pretty good. It's not Bauer good or anything like that, and I actually think my Optic 3s were better than that, and my Hazardous are better than this for rebounds as well. This is probably on close to about Warriors. It's not bad, it's just not absolutely amazing. It's kind of just in between, which is a very consistent thing with the SLR line. It's not the stiffest thing in the world, so it's like not the extremes, but it's also not the softest, so it's not that extreme. It's kind of like right in the middle. I did find, interestingly enough, I found the boots on these to be more rebounding than I have recently for a bunch of pads, specifically ones that have that flatter boot shape. So you can see how this one is a bit more angled. I really noticed it on the new Bauer pads where anything that hits the boot just absolutely dies and not a very great spot. I found with the Vaughns though, it kind of kicks out a bit more, and I'm gonna contribute that to this being thicker and there being just more pad for the puck to kind of go into, then come off of, where the Bauers are getting really thin. Another piece on this pad that they have is their roll. So they do have that triangular roll still, and you can see it basically right here. It doesn't look extremely massive. I don't know if this is the max height or not. It doesn't really look like it compared to some other pads I've seen, and it is kind of a bit more understated, and I think the V10 still have that square roll. You could order this square if you want to, Vaughn's Custom for example, so you can order your own specs on that to make it what you want. I wish this was max. If it's not, these rolls actually do have a purpose, and it does cut down the angle for pucks kind of coming off the ice if this roll sticks out as much as possible. It basically acts as the pad being slightly bigger than what it really is, just because that is just how that angle works on there. So if this isn't full size, I kind of wish it was. I have seen stuff in the past too where pucks hit rolls and they keep in and out. That said, this roll is pretty soft. As you can see, I can kind of push into it a lot, which isn't necessarily the best, because when a puck hits that and it's soft, has a better chance of going that way versus if it hits it and it comes out. So this could probably be a bit of a stiffer material in there. I don't know if Vaughn has an option to stiffen this roll, because you can see how soft it is. Moving on to the sliding edge here. This is something that Vaughn has done pretty well recently, and I'm a big fan of it. Vaughn's core and torsional flex on this pad, it is even this one, which is stiffer than this one, is still kind of flexy. Like, it has that torsional flex on it. So the seal kind of gets compromised a bit when you really lean into it. This thick piece right here does a pretty good job of sealing that, and this design kind of reminds me of that rounded medial roll on the old Premier pads and that pads had previously. So this kind of sticking out does a decent job of covering that up. And when you turn it this way, you can really see how much that kind of plays and how much different that piece is compared to the rest of the core. It does a pretty solid job of keeping this pad kind of on the ice as much as possible with kind of just how this pad is designed and how it is more flexible around your body. Now, materials on here feels the same. It's a pretty stiff foam on here. It's not the hardest thing. It doesn't feel like it's plastic through there, which some companies do now. And it has a bit of give to it, but it is pretty solid all the way down, and it adds to the excellent sliding that is on this pad. This knee block in design feels very similar to the two, if they're not identical to each other. The one difference on here that you can see is the gapping right here, and that will add for more flexibility below the pad. So you can see this kind of gets hit right here and it gets stopped. This one is on more of a slope, so you can push down further. So it's going to allow that pad to bend further down on you. Now, because of that too, thigh rise, any pucks that hit that are kind of going to bend down there. This one, it's still bent a little bit, but this will kind of get in the way a bit more of it. This is going to move a little bit with your leg moving, especially depending on your strapping. So that is an interesting choice that they made there to make this one a bit softer in that sense. This is a huge change, but I'm not going to cover the materials in this. We'll cover it in 1 second when I talk about the seal and everything. But this piece is a lot softer than what this one is. And you can just kind of see how flexible this one is. And that one is stiffer through there. You can see your NHL legal binding and gap right here. The binding itself isn't necessary, but the gap itself is. So you do need a specific size across, and these two can't be all one piece. So this one wouldn't have been legal, but I have seen SLR2s that I had that were Matt Murray's that were demos had this design in here. So if you were a pro, probably get this one. Interesting that Vaughn is doing it on the retail ones here. We see that on True and kind of CCM now as well. Down here, you see a really nice small change. There is a exposed piece of nylon right here, which does have a little bit of wear on it, which ideally you can see right there. It's very minimal. Generally speaking, this part is pretty soft, so it will touch the ice first, and this will generally touch the ice, but there is a little spot right there. And Vaughn just brought that piece all the way up. This is a thing that I've seen a lot of companies kind of skimp out on. Bauer is really bad at this. I love the fact that this goes all the way up here. It's a small attention to detail, but really there's no reason to have this binding exposed. It's just going to wear out if it's on the sliding edge, and that definitely hides it behind there. And speaking of the sliding edge too, you do have this part right here to ensure that nylon isn't going to be the thing on the ice. And when your ankle is down there, it's going to be this quick slide, which is very good. And speaking of sliding, since we are on this side, this is once again basically the best sliding pad on the market besides the V10. Anything with Vaughn's quick slide is just amazing. It's just how it is. It's better than the Brian's one. The coating on here is just really good. Now, I say basically because the only pad that has been comparable to this recently is the Warrior with the slide plates on it, the plastic plates. When it's on fresh ice and good ice, these slide better than the Warriors, and the whole pad slides better. With the Warrior, it is just the slide plate. So like down here, you can really tell it's not sliding like this one does. But on this pad, when it gets to rougher ice, just because this pad isn't a hard plastic block here and actually is like foam materials and has a little bit of give to it, notice that I start noticing the bumps and the cuts and the ridges in rough ice. So these ones do kind of slow down a bit more than what the Warriors feel like, but it's honestly nitpicking there. And this one is still the best sliding pad overall. And with that said, some people comment a lot, especially when they're watching like my videos, and they say that these pads overslide. Same with the Warriors. One thing I want to make note of on this, when you move to a pad that slides normally, so that isn't this material, so Brian's, True, Bauer, CCM, any other brand but this one, and basically Warrior. But even Warrior is a bit different because I said down here on the Warriors doesn't slide like this. It takes a bit to get used to. So when you switch pads like I do a lot going back and forth, I kind of overplay sometimes with these pads because I'm just so used to wearing other things, and it takes a bit to get it used to it. So really, if I wore these for like 2 skates, 3 skates straight, I would probably dial in the speed of them and figure it out, and it is fine. One thing on these I notice a lot is because all of this is more slippery as well. When you dive into post, so hard RVH post leans, just attack, like going hard into post to try to make a save, you hit the post and the pad kind of still slides on you. And that is honestly because of just how well this slides. Now you get used to it and you kind of know how to play with it once you get used to it, but it takes a bit of a learning curve, and you might as well have that extra little, because if you need like that much space and a faster sliding pad would get you there, why wouldn't you want that in your disposal? You'll learn how to control it and you'll be quicker overall. And a lot of people also say, if you want to be fast at sliding, just get stronger and work out. Cool, good job. But guess what? If you work out and get stronger and you use these pads, you're going to be even faster sliding than you would regardless. So top speed for sliding and quicker sliding and mobility for that, I'm always for, and it's always a bonus feature. Going on to the boots, you can see the shape of these is pretty similar to each other. The material on here also feels the same as well. And even though these boots are different in shape wise, and I'll show off how they sit on your skate in a second, you can see the thickness on here is very close to each other. This one honestly even looks slightly bigger. This is the 4 I'm talking about right now than what the 3 is. And when I kind of hold it like this, it feels slightly bigger as well. So interesting that has less of a boot channel in it, that the 4 is still a thicker overall boot than what the 3 is. And a lot of companies are doing. A lot of companies are going to a skinnier boot here. So it's not the case there, which I'm a big fan of. Looking on the toe part here as well, you get that quick slide all the way through. So that is going to help with durability. You could just do whatever you want. This is all an option on their customizer. And then when we get on the outside of the boot, you can see the same thing as well, right? Same thickness basically, or it's so close to one another that it's not a big difference between the two, and really just how that sits on your skate is the big difference. Stock toe ties are this bungee cord piece, which I find totally fine. It's nice and thin all the way through for this, and it has an elastic to it, and it's a pretty thick material, and I wouldn't find a need to switch with these. If I was doing this myself, I would probably put my skate lace slack in here just to give myself a bit of that slack, but honestly, I didn't notice an issue with this, and connecting into the post for integration, it felt totally fine. Here, we can really see that different defined boot channel, and the interesting thing here is that this is still, like, it still has that defined outer side and inner side right there. You can see it right there. This is just flatter. This is the way a ton of pad companies are going now. True did this, well, LeFave did this on their first pads that they split away from CCM, and basically it feels like everyone else is kind of going this route as well. Obviously, this creates more of a tabletop boot. You have less pad interference with the ice in your stance, but also it helps the pad sit higher up on your skate so you get more thigh rise coverage as well. There's a lot of benefits to it. People like it. People prefer it. This is kind of the way most pad companies are going. On the SLR3, it kind of did something similar for all intents and purposes. You can see how, while it does have that channel, this part did stick out, so your skate really sat kind of on that more. Same with the other side. So it definitely had a more grooved out channel, as you can see, but this part did stick out. But when I show the next clip of this, you can see how much lower this pad sits on your skate than the new one. 3s just sat a lot lower, 4s sit higher up. Sizing and everything is totally fine and the same there, which is a good job by Vaughn, because sometimes when that changes, sizing changes, but Vaughn did a good job adjusting the pad or just kind of working with everything. Even though this design is a lot flatter and it sits higher in your skate, the pad still fits the same way. Something that I think is kind of interesting and a little bit disappointing is Vaughn did not include their kind of cover pieces right here that was on the V10s. V10s had basically another little piece covering the inside section on here for the quick slide, and it would kind of go over here to make sure this nylon cord binding through here wasn't getting hit by your skate or worn out at all. It wasn't necessary on this one since it was so deep into this channel, but it's a nice change there. Gone is this nice gray, like dark gray Nash-like material. They're just using quick slide, which will be more durable and more slippery on your pad as well. Core-Tech, which are Coreshorts, and people have heard of these before. They were labeled under Under Armour before. Now Bauer sells hockey-specific one, but Core themselves sell their own line of pants and supportive clothing and apparel. Basically, this stuff helps you with growing strains, growing pulls, and helps keep your hips tight and everything like that. And speaking of injuries, I kind of pulled a growing playing in the playoffs a few months ago and have had to keep using these Core-Tech shorts to make sure my growing doesn't get worse. When I don't wear them, I can feel it and it hurts kind of to walk the next day. With these, keeps everything nice and tight and keeps everything from stretching out too far and getting injured. So these have been a huge savior for me. Check out the link in the description to their website and use my coupon code that's in there to get a discount, and I'll put it on the screen here. It helps support myself and the channel so I can make content and doing real reviews, but also you get a solid product that I use all the time. So as you can see, the boot design on here is totally different. The SLR3 fit like a more traditional pad of Vaughn's where it had that boot channel and it sits a lot lower, where the 4 obviously fits like a tabletop like a bunch of other companies are, and like the V10s are now. So as a comparison, we'll take a look all the way around the skate just to see how much difference this is. And you can just see how the old one sat so much lower on that boot and just played like a lot more of a traditional pad. When you look at that new one, it sits totally different. As you can see. Also, even though it fits so much lower on that, like on your skate, the sizing of them is basically the same. So this one comes up slightly more, in your stance than this one, but the sizing on them is the same. And when we actually drop down, you can see my knee ends up basically the same spot on both of them. And I wore both of these pads on the ice at the same time. So one pad was the SLR3, one was the SLR4. I have a video of that to show it off. And the sizing of them plays the exact same. The only difference is that boot shape and everything, but the actual pad itself fit from one generation to the next, which is nice because it's pretty easy to recommend the same size as what you had before, as you can see. So with that new boot shape and the tabletop design, which you can pretty much see here, it does allow you to kind of drive into posts a bit easier with that, theoretically. Now, I have noticed a bit different. I actually find the 3s work a bit better, and I'll show you why in a second. But I find this is okay to attach to the post. It's not the best thing ever. I could put slack on here to kind of pull it away a bit too, but you can see how much that toe tie is actually moving anyway. So it is allowing me to kind of jam in there like that if I have to. But generally speaking, this boot feels like it's a bit shorter. So actually landing in here, I find a bit harder than what was on the 3, but it's fine. Now, with that said, you can also do this as well. You also have the post in here, kind of that RVH. And when you come down here, you can see the gap just because of the relatively bigger outer roll. It is angled, but it is a bit taller, so it doesn't seal totally perfect at the bottom there, but it should generally be fine if you do the calf lean in here. And I found with the SLR3, even with the boot channel, because you can see the skate just still sits way off the boot, it was actually super easy to slide into post and to get into post. I'm having a harder time now just because of how this net is set up, but I would find I would be able to RVH into these posts really easily on the ice. And I actually found that this is easier to do than the 4s, just because it felt like the toe was a bit longer than what is on the 4s. And it just felt like it was easier to kind of slide in there and get this in the right spot. But everything else is pretty much the same on this. You can still do, like, the shin and everything is the same between the two, so it's not a big difference there. There's no boot strap either on here. This is kind of just the stock offering. Obviously, Vaughn is custom, so you can do what you want. I wish companies did this in the terms of adding a loop here, just so you can carry your pads easier. Yes, you could kind of put it through here, but it would be so much nicer if companies just added a little pad bootstrap loop so you can carry it over here nicely. Yes, you can use these, but I don't want to use bungees or elastics because it will stretch when you carry them, and all the straps on here are elastic. I would like a little, just a tiny little loop here, or what Brian's does and has a tiny little loop right down here so you can tie your pads and attach your pads. Very small thing that I wish all companies did, and I would love to see it just for like a nicer attention to detail and the quality of life thing. Going on the outside gusset of these pads, very similar overall. I will mention that this SLR3 that I had custom, the pink was an option to get Gen Pro on here because I wanted pink on here. Normally it was nylon. I paid extra to get that pink Gen Pro just because I wanted more pink on the side. Nylon all the way through here, which is totally fine. You can see the thickness is basically the same, and honestly the construction of this feels very similar as well. The big difference, well, it's not even a big difference really. We get down here and this binding is now gone. This was an interesting design choice that Vaughn did on the SLR3 and I kind of liked it, but they got rid of it here, and this is all bindingless all the way through, but it just goes throughout the whole pad, and we get back down here onto the actual toe piece, and you can see because there's no more binding here as well, it's just all internal. It kind of cuts off right here, and it looks really interesting when you're looking down on it. Kind of just looks like a duckbill kind of sandwiched in together, and it's kind of just a weird looking thing. I don't know if this will show off on camera, but when I looked at it, it just looked so different than any other pads. So going on to the inside, and we can see a lot of similarities but also a ton of differences, specifically over here, which I'll talk about in 1 second. We have basically the same internal channel here. You have a soft, that gray kind of blackish Nash right here, very soft, feels great. And you have this kind of canal with hard foams around it, and your leg kind of just sits in there. And you have this outer wing here, which is very similar to this. I'm pretty sure this was air knit before, and I optioned it to be nylon just because there's wear points a lot you see at the top of these with air knit, with knee pads and just stuff like that where everything rubs. So I put nylon there for more durability. For these right here, the strapping on here is basically the same. This was an option that I added on, which kind of connects here, and I took it off right away, never really used it. This is kind of interesting and just a weird thing I noticed. This piece right here is a medium density foam all the way through and got a bit bigger compared to this, which is totally fine. But this one had holes in it, which I'm assuming was for weight savings. And that has holes. This one is totally solid. So interesting that that was a choice and they changed that up. You also have this inner piece, which is kind of its own thing right now. So this whole wing is its own pretty plush, soft foam right here, all the way through with that sliding piece right here, where this one was connected to the calf wing itself. As you can see, it's kind of pulling down and tied in right here. Big difference on this one, and it kind of makes this entire channel a little bit thinner because you can see where this attachment point is kind of a little bit more in there. This one is a little bit more closer to the edge, but it's still a pretty open channel. And depending on how you do the strapping, which I'll talk about in a second, you can make it tighter or looser as you want. Now, the big change on here, which I love, is this calf pillow. So this is a very soft foam. As you can see, it is sewn in. Some other companies are having it removable. It is sewn in here. Obviously, you don't get that on the other one. And that kind of creates this whole sandwich piece right here. So you have this outer piece right here for your harder landing. You have this for comfort as well as pushing down, as well as helping with stability. Because once your leg kind of hits that, it's kind of distributing that force more on here and stabilizing this more to really kind of help also drive this down if your leg isn't totally sealed. That's kind of that thing where, because of this design over here where it is just two pieces, if your leg is kind of just touching this, it isn't going to do a lot to push the pad down and to push the half part down, where this is definitely going to help with that, having a nice plush piece here and then that pillow. Now this strap right here is connected to this outer wing, which we could see on the previous one as well. Same idea with that one. Now, speaking of these wings, we're going to come back to that right now. And I talked about how soft this one was. As you can see, very soft. It's flexy. It doesn't do a whole lot. When you kind of put weight on it, it flexes and you can really notice it, and the whole pad kind of can twist and has torsional flex and moves with you. This is a lot stiffer. So you can see it still flexes. So it's not like a hard piece of plastic, but the foam in here is a lot stiffer than what was on there previously. And I love this little feature of some gear. And that's the case with here, where you can just Velcro this out. And you can take this foam out. So if this gets damaged or you need to replace it, you can do it. Or if you want to mod it, you can do it without sewing anything. So I love that this is a Velcroable piece right there, and you can make those changes. So this strap is also just tied in to the core of the pad right there. And then this part is sewn into this wing. But an interesting part is this strap right here is also sort of removable, but not really. You can see it actually has their carbon material right there holding everything in place. And I'm guessing the material itself, like the elastic, is sewn into this somehow, but that is in there. Feel it and squish it, and that is their kind of carbon fiber material, but that is put in there. So kind of interesting that it's sewn in there and kind of done that way, instead of just having like a really wide, I don't know, nylon piece to make it more easily replaceable. And on the previous one, it was tied into this piece. Didn't have that carbon piece. As you can see, it's very foldable. There's nothing in there. And this had a zipper where you could take this foam out as well. So a little bit different idea behind here. A huge fan of this pillow. It does make a difference. One of the new features on this pad is that pillow, which is right under here, which is helping to stabilize this, as well as cheating a little bit in terms of like your pad being down. So when I'm stretched out like this, it does help a little bit to push that down, just because there is now this pillow as well as the wrap kind of pushing that part down, and it doesn't fall all the way down because the strap's kind of holding that there as expected, but it definitely does help pushes down a little bit when you're outstretched and your knees comes off the ice, and that pillow is a big factor for that there. And when we look on this side, you can see there is no pillow there, and without that pillow, it doesn't have anything pushing the pad kind of down and sealing this part more. And I've noticed when using these two pads next to each other that this piece was off the ice a lot more than what was on the other one, and that's because of that whole design there. And you can kind of see the difference that it makes here. The other part of it is stability with that is increased a lot. This piece was so soft that it kind of flexed. As you can see, it still is soft on the new one, but with that pillow just kind of pushing everything down, it just adds a lot more pad stability when you're moving like this. This pad feels like a lot more of a traditional, softer type of Vaughn pad in terms of stability and how it sits there, versus this one where this part is on the ice a lot more. Like when I raise my leg, you can see how much more this is on because of that pillow, and all this piece right here feels so much more stable when you're moving around, so it doesn't feel like it's kind of lifting with your leg and moving with your leg. So you get a lot more stability down here versus what the pad had before. And that's not to do with the knee block, that integrated knee block. One, it's to do with the core being a bit stiffer, but this piece down here is a big factor for that. So it's a really good change by Vaughn. Vaughn went the way with the V10s on this. So they took out the internal professor strap thing, or rotation control strap, whatever they call it. That is what I had here. I never wore them anyways on these pads. Helps pull the pad up and higher up your leg, which I don't want when I size my pads up. So these are their new, I think they're called rotation control straps. I can't remember. And this is how they work. They're the same as the V10s. So there's two attachment points for each. Inside, as you can see right here, and then outside right here, exact same as V10. I think the way this goes, the shorter one is on the bottom bottom, because the longer one has further to go, kind of wrapping around your leg, and this one is kind of the smaller part of your leg down here. So how these work as well, they open up like this, and you just sandwich it between this and you put it through, and then you have to loop it through here, and then it loops back over. So I took these out pretty quickly. I used them, I think, for the first skate, and I don't like these. And as you can see with this pad, I keep the strapping really minimal, one on the knee, one to here, and I'm good with it. So having these internal straps wasn't my preference. I also tried them on the outside, same thing. It's just too tight for what I prefer. It does what it kind of wants to do and everything, and they're decent quality straps with Gen Pro all the way through. I did absolutely destroy, you can kind of see my finger, hopefully right here, where it was bleeding like crazy because of elastic on these pads. When I was wearing them and testing them, it just ripped my skin apart. And it's kind of annoying because of how you can see how the sticky part of the Velcro goes all the way through. I really wish there was a tab on this, and I noticed it worse on these pads than a lot of pads I've used recently, because every strap is like that. But I don't like these straps also because of how deep this strap piece is. I get that you have to kind of connect it internally like this to get that leverage you kind of want to have, and it also hides those straps in case you don't want them. But getting these on is so annoying because it's so deep in this channel, and this is kind of a nitpick, but it was the same thing with the V10s. It's just awkward, and I feel like it's too much, and there could be a better design for this somehow. I'm not sure if like having this Gen Pro going all the way up here and having it tie across, if that would work, or at least putting it out here maybe and allowing it to wrap. Maybe that's not a tight enough channel that they're looking for. I just found these super awkward and one of the worst implementations of the strapping there is, to be honest. And Vaughn might be angry for me saying that, but yes, you have two spots here. You can sort of move it here. You have all the Velcro here, and then you have these spots, obviously, so you can get outside or inside. It's just putting it on is a huge pain. Even if this didn't loop around and just had a Velcro thing attached to, it would be nicer in terms of like actual just usage. Again, this is kind of a nitpick because the straps work and they kind of do what you want. You can really tighten this up if you want. You can leave it kind of loose, so it kind of acts like that FRS design and kind of a professor strap. But just to be totally honest, this design on this and the V10s have been my least favorite pad strap design, since like the only other pad that I don't enjoy using is like these CCMs that have that basically the same strap design on the inside of theirs. So I took those internal kind of straps out on here because I like a looser fitting pad, and for these demonstrations I was going down here just so this doesn't get in the way of my knee, and it kind of allows the pad to float a bit more. But when I wore these, this strap was coming up to my knee and it worked totally fine, but those inner straps were just too tight for me, and I just don't like having those there. And I feel like Vaughn does a decent job. Like these two anchor points are good enough on this pad that I don't need anything more, and it feels locked in there. But going on to one of the interesting parts of this pad, the 3 had this outer binding going through it and going right under the knee right here, which I thought was an interesting design because they went bindingless up here, kind of like a lot of companies are doing, but then did the binding down here to be a more traditional pad. So it was kind of a blend of the two. That's kind of gone out here, but you can still see that inner binding going right here, and it looks pretty interesting. It doesn't really do much, but is a cool separation of the top and the bottom of the pads right there. And if you really want to put your fingers through here, you can really feel what the inner pad of this is designed as, which is kind of interesting in that sense. And this knee right here is a slightly different spec for straps than what is normally stock. So these are Just Hockey's demo set. Just Hockey, when they order sets, pick specific specs out of gear that they think people will want more, and this is kind of the case here. So normally it has some sort of inner padding like this on that knee piece right here. That is taken out of this one, opens up the knee channel a little bit more, just flattens everything out, smooths everything out. When I was going to order a custom set of these, I was going to do the same thing, just because I don't really need any of that extra stuff back there. You don't really notice this disappearing either. It's a really nice design, kind of cool to the touch, nice materials. I don't think it's really necessary anymore in the face of pads. When you're wearing knee pads and everything, you don't need that little bit extra plushness. Now, something that's kind of interesting is when you put your fingers on here, you can really feel this pad and the core of it. So there is like a big hole right here. There's a big hole right here, and there's a harder piece right there. And when you put your fingers under here, you can really feel it as well. I'm assuming they do that for saving weight, and it was on my previous pads as well on here. So you can feel it in there as well, but you don't notice it because of that outer piece. On this, I noticed it touching it. I never noticed it using it on ice though, and I never noticed issues after pucks hit it with the thigh rise test. Now it's going through knee pads, so obviously it's kind of hard to do. Removable outer flap here, just tied in like this. Pretty straightforward, same idea. This one was just nylon. This one has their nice gray Nash on there. So a little nicer on this one, maybe a little bit more durable than what the nylon is, but either way, there's no issues I had with the nylon. I've had people ask me me over and over again of what socks I always recommend, and I've been using Cutshield for a while now, and have multiple stuff from them. So Cutshield is a company out of Canada that makes cut resistant socks, and these are their Pro Air 6, which means it's an anti-level 6 for cut resistance on here. They also make pretty awesome slash guards and wrist guards. You see them in the NHL a lot. Basically look for this gray material under players' gloves and under their elbow pads, and it's probably Cutshield. But I now have a coupon code with Cutshield, so if you want to support the channel, you can check out the link in the description to Cutshield, buy some socks, which I think are honestly one of the better socks on the market. I absolutely love them. They're pretty thin and they are cut resistant, and they're not too hot either. And I have no issues with these whatsoever on my custom skates where I need a really thin one. You can see how you can basically see my skin through them, so they are thin on here. And this part doesn't really feel or get that hot compared to some of those Kevlar socks. So I absolutely love this material. So check them out. I always recommend them. Use my coupon code. You get 25% off, and it helps support the channel so I can keep making videos and making more content. This is something I want to call out because this is one of the first pads where I've had to make note of this. And I really wish I did the full review of the SLR3s. I never got around to it. When I got them, the pads were kind of already later in their life cycle and just kind of passed by me, unfortunately. These are the worst knee blocks I've used in a while. I can't even remember. The last bad pair that was like this was, I think, the Bauer 195 Pro Returns. I could not wear this pad on back-to-back night with my Bauer 1X knee pads because my knees were so beat up from dropping on them because of how hard this material is. So this is a really hard foam in here, and it is just so solid. And you can't like actually even tell how hard this is. This thing is just an absolute brick. Does have padding here, which honestly feels pretty plush and nice to the touch. It's just this thing is so hard that the padding on my Bowers was not enough and my knees would just be gone. So I couldn't wear this pad 2 days in a row. But the crazy thing too, I could wear another pair of pads the second day, had no issues on my knees even after they're beat up. It's just this was so hard that landing on this over and over again honestly just hurt and was really disappointing. It's the same thing for this block, unfortunately. It does feel slightly softer to the touch, but like barely. And I noticed it as well. I specifically brought out those Bauer knee pads to land on this, and it was the same thing. So they don't have a ton of cushioning, especially compared to Warriors. The Warrior ones I wear all the time, and Warrior ones I can get away with. If I did like 3 days, it was tough. It started feeling it, but 2 was fine. Bowers I couldn't do 2. Same thing here. This block is just too hard right here, and the whole purpose of this hard block is for stability, so you can drop faster. And it's interesting because this one doesn't feel like it's as like hard as this one does all the way through, and it feels like it's kind of changed the shape of it a little bit, but the material through here is still really hard, and I felt it, and it is honestly not very comfortable. I think they have to figure something out with here. Maybe I'm the only person complaining about this, but this material feels soft and pretty good, but it's just not enough for how hard this block is. I almost wish they did like 3/4 the size of this block, added a piece of more like HD foam, and then had this just to soften that knee landing a lot, because it is a lot. Now, if you're doing it once a week, maybe it's not a thing that you'd notice, but if you're using this more than once a week, it was absolutely something I noticed and something I wanted to call out. Another thing they changed on this is I really like this idea on the 3s, was how it kind of folded over. So this was longer than the actual connection point. As you can see, the Velcro didn't go all the way through, so it would fold over and kind of cradle your leg a little bit. I didn't really notice if it saved anything from falling off. I don't think it would, because really, if your weight's coming through there, it's just going to flatten it out anyways. But that is gone on the new one, where this Velcro kind of goes all the way through, and it doesn't really fold, as you can see, as much. The purpose of these knee pads is to be harder into the block, and you can see this one still moves a decent amount. This one did as well. It still moved a pretty decent amount for both of them, and this does have that kind of brace that goes into the face of the pad to try to be more stable, and we'll take a closer look in a second. But this one definitely does have a lot more movement than what I've shown off recently. Warriors, Bowers, I don't mind this because I think this is kind of a problem. I showed it on a few clips on Instagram where it gets in the way when you're trying to make a desperation play. So this has enough give to it that it shouldn't be a real problem. And what I mean is, when you land kind of like this on the pad, fortunately the camera is not down here, but when you land not flat, the knee block won't get in the way because it flexes, and the pad will be able to kind of cover itself. Where if you have a really hard one with Bowers, it kind of hits and it gets stuck up here with the pad not sealing. So this definitely helps on those desperation plays, and I'm a bigger fan of this design than what is on those other ones. Also, having it braced on here will give it more durability, since this won't kind of flail out after a while because it does have that brace. The strap on this calf is the same has a loop right here, goes through, ties up. Again, this is a case where I really wish this was like finished with a piece of Gen Pro or something, a tab to pull. You can see how that sticky Velcro is right at the end, and that totally ripped apart my hands. So I really do wish this was finished up a little bit nicer, and it's on this one too. So I just wish those straps were just like a little tab or something there, so it was a bit nicer on your fingers. So opening this up, you have Velcro here, and this one was slightly different because it has a tab going over the top. So you have to open this side first, and then it has these pieces right here. And then it has this inner piece that you can actually remove. As you can see it flying off, and you have that block right here where this one opens up like that. And then that other side opens up like that. And you can see kind of the cord on this piece right here, kind of also holding it in place. And this part doesn't come out all the way. It is also attached in here versus the other one, which was totally removable. And same thing on here, you can see the cord going through there, but again, this is slightly different. And you could see when you really looked in here, but I can't really get this on camera. On here, you can kind of see where it goes into the actual face of the pad, and it's really hard for me to get in here and take a look. But if you get really close, which again, can't really get on camera, but you can get in there and see the kind of inner core of that pad. This pad, same kind of idea. If you really look behind these bindings, you can kind of see the foams and feel the foams in there, feel the structure in there. And Vaughn also had a demonstration of it. When I saw them, they had a picture of like what the core is. I think they posted on Instagram at one point. But you can see the foams kind of going into the face right here. But the interesting thing is I don't feel any composite material, so I'm not sure if it's in there or what side it's on, but the foams are going in there and you can kind of see it moving, but it's not as rigid and stuck in place as some other companies. And for me, that's totally fine because like I mentioned, I prefer this style compared to the other ones. And this one is kind of a nice hybrid between the two if you want it in there. Going on to the final part of the top, you can see very similar, very blank overall. I do like how it does have Gen Pro up here just to allow for some rubbing on here. So it'll be Gen Pro and Gen Pro versus nylon. Just a little durability thing. You can see a little bit of wear on the corners of mine. Very minimal, but having that there will just be a little bit extra durability, which is a nice thing. Gone is the little carbon show though, which is kind of sad. That's gone. Just, it would have been nice to have behind 34+2, but it doesn't really make any difference whatsoever. Everything else is pretty similar there. Going on to the core of the pad, we can see that mine is pretty stiff, but it smooths a little bit, but not crazy stiff as some of those other companies. And this one has really stiffened up. You can really see how much stiffer that is. And feeling this with your hands, you can really feel a difference between this. Now, I believe Vaughn has said they took their carbon and wrapped it over the top to give it that more structural stability. And it really does feel like it's a lot stiffer. There is some kind of pieces back here you can feel with your hands. That was totally gone on back here. This was just all foam and you could see the bend on that and everything. This definitely feels a lot stiffer than what was on that one. So huge improvement there. It's gonna be more durable. It's gonna have a stiffer thigh rise for better thigh rise seal overall. Pad seal is pretty solid when you're in the RVH. It does come up a bit on the corner, but that's kind of, it happens on most pads, and with the torsional flex on this, it's gonna happen a bit. You can watch the puck machine test to see how well this thigh rise works for stopping pucks, but overall pad seal and everything on here is pretty good. Even if you really lean into this, it's really hard for a puck to actually like get under there, and it's probably not going to do anything. You'd have to be like on top of it and it's still not doing anything. So ice seal for this is really solid. One of the differences on the 4 compared to the 3 is they really did beef up the core for the carbon and how it wraps. With the 3, you can see how much this moved, and it did have a ton of torsional flex on it. Like, look at how much this pad is flexing. And especially like when you lead into it, it really flexed over like this. As you can see, kind of opened up that a bit more too. Where this one is stiffer, but it still has a bit of that torsional flex, as you can see, but it is stiffer. You can still go stiffer than what this is. When I ordered this pad as stiff as I could get for the SLR3s. For this is just the stock stiffness. So this is still stiffer than what this is. As you can see, this one's also a lot more used, so this one will probably break down closer to that, but it is a stiffer core altogether and is more stable in your positions. And when you kind of lean, it leans less than what the other one did in the past. So it is stiffening up a bit more at stock, and you can go even stiffer on this if you want to. You can also go softer if you want to, if that's what you're looking for. One of the big changes, and I'm not sure if it's the core that is only doing this, I think it's the calf, wing, and the knee block as well, is SLR3s, which are these ones, had a tendency to kind of fold over like this when playing, and basically any movement you make, it kind of just folds out that way, where this one stays a lot more upright. And when you move in, it still moves, but the knee block and the calf kind of keep it a lot more straighter. And really, this pad should be kind of up like this. But when you have pants and everything on, it ends up pushing the top away. And because that knee block and that calf is kind of pretty soft generally overall, and even though it has that piece going into the face, it can still flex outwards like this because of the torsional flex, how this pad was. This one is a lot stiffer for that. So you can see the difference, how much less this pad goes out that way compared to this one, which really moves. And when you're kind of moving and leaning, you can really see the difference in the thighs. And like when you're coming close to this pad should be kind of up like this. Pants push it away and you can see that difference. But I think Vaughn did an excellent job here and differentiating this pad more with the velocity line. Vaughn really hasn't, based on their retail offerings, had a really stiff kind of pad with a really stiff core and everything. And even this isn't all that stiff. When I use both of these side by side, I notice a difference, but really they felt very similar in playing. And that's honestly a good thing. I love very, very stiff pads. This isn't a very, very, very stiff pad. It's a stiff pad. And this pad is going to be a very good option for a lot of people. Don't want to go in that plywood feeling pad and still want some torsional flex on there and more of, I'm going to say, a bit of a traditional pad feeling, just how everything kind of feels overall. It has better stability than the other one had. It has less torsional flex, but it is still a very Vaughn feeling pad. So it doesn't lose that feel and offers something I think that they haven't really had before. My complaint with the SLR3, and honestly, it's a complaint for me because I wanted it stiffer, but if I titled an SLR3 review, it would have been the best stiff pad for people who don't like stiff pads, basically, because it has so many features of stuff goalies who like that stiff pad probably don't want and want something stiffer, but it is a nice bridge between the two extremes. And I think this one only makes that gap a little bit bigger between their soft line and this line, while also giving a pretty solid pad overall, and one I could easily recommend. And or try a Bauer pad and don't like the stiffness. This is a pretty solid option. Now, I personally think a direct competitor to this is a Catalyst pad that is stiffer. My stiff Catalyst pads are stiffer than these are. Kind of the stock Catalyst pad, that would feel pretty close to overall everything on here. In terms of torsional flex and how everything kind of plays, it'd be kind of pretty close. So you kind of have to figure out what you're exactly looking for. I have no problems recommending this pad. It's very solid. I would happily wear one. I really enjoyed my time with it. Definitely check them out at Just Hockey. Check out that link in the comment. Thank you very much for watching this video. Remember to check out the videos on the glove and the blocker, as well as the thigh rise test, which will all be linked below. Again, huge thanks to Just Hockey. Thank you very much for watching this video. Remember to like this video, subscribe to YouTube, follow me on Instagram and TikTok, links in the description. I teamed up with Just Hockey to offer an exclusive discount code on all Vaughn SLR4 gear. So if you go in the comments of this video, get that coupon code, go to their website, buy something Vaughn SLR4 related, and you'll get a specific discount and unique discount from this. I don't get a kickback from this. I just want to do videos on gear and make content on reviews on equipment. This helps me do that. So if you want to show your support to Just Hockey so I can keep doing this, go on there, buy some stuff from them, use that code. It'd be greatly appreciated. It would help me and helps them out, and shows that them lending me their gear like this helps them out as well. Otherwise, if you want to support the channel without buying anything hockey related, check out the links in the description to buy me a coffee and Patreon. Everything through any of those links always comes back into the channel so I can keep making more content and doing more reviews. Thank you very much for watching, and take it easy.
You're watching HockeyReviews.ca.